the comments in Green Bay there.
Thank you, Father. Hello, everyone. I'm Vicki Jackalone from Catholic United Financial. Thanks for spending the afternoon with us. It won't be the entire afternoon, but part of your day with us, and we appreciate that. So I got a fun little story. Yesterday, I'm driving with my 4.5-year-old granddaughter in the car, and she says, Gigi, tomorrow is Christmas. And I was like, wait a minute here. I said, oh no, honey, that can't be because I haven't bought any presents. I haven't planned. And she said, oh, wait a minute, it's on Thursday. So it's kind of a fun little story to think about what we're going to cover today. You know, we always think about, oh, we have plenty of time. You know, Christmas is still 2.5 months away. I don't want to know how many days because I haven't planned. But one of the key things is that's going to be here faster than what we would like it to be. You know, Christmas will be here in a blink. And we may feel that same way about the topic today, our end of our life. What questions we might want to have to be prepared for when that time comes. And so Father Sebastian is going to provide wisdom and knowledge from our faith. And as you approach that season of life, prior to moving to heaven, your permanent home, what are the things that you want to make sure that you're prepared for? In addition to that, we have Anna from Peterson Kramer. She's going to be available to share some information from the funeral home perspective and help you prepare for that part of your final stage. And then last but not least, we have John Tetzloff, who is from our home office in St. Paul, Minnesota. He is a director and 30-some years of experience, and he's going to talk about estate planning, because it's not just about funeral planning as we look at this stage of life. It is also about what do we do with all of those beautiful gifts that we've accumulated along the way, and how do we get them to the next generation. So with that, we'll ask Father to bless us, and then we'll get started.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we ask you to pour your Holy Spirit upon us, open our hearts and minds to understand and be able to do your will. We ask you for the souls of our faithful departed. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. For all the dying, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. I like the picture much. It's like 40 pounds down. Okay, so we're going to talk about something that we know is going to come, whether we like it or not. Death is part of our existence. Unless you are expecting the return of the Lord in your lifetime, and you will be judged as the living, most likely we are going to be dying and will be buried. And so this is something that we can push aside and kind of not think about it for a while, but eventually when you get older, that issue is knocking on your door. I know it's knocking on my door. I never thought of my funeral or my death before, but now as I'm getting closer to 60s, it becomes an issue because the diocese is reminding me that I haven't finished my will yet, the instructions for my funeral, I'm probably the only priest who haven't done it yet. So they are reminding me, everybody is reminding me that, you know, you are going to die. So how do we face this situation? Well, first of all, let's talk about before we die. You know, there are many issues, ethical issues when it comes to person dying. It has to do with the modern medicine that is now able to keep us alive for a very long time, even though we are not able to function on our own. We can be connected to all kinds of devices and maintain our life artificially. When is it okay to pull the plug, so to speak? I'm going to go straight to the point, because that's what very often people ask. Do we have the obligation to keep the person alive for as long as we possibly can? Do we have to sell the car and the house to pay for those bills for the person to be alive? Some people think that we do. John Paul II, in his encyclical Evangelium Vitae, he was very specific talking about those different issues. The general rule is that if those procedures have reasonable hope and expectation of recovery, then if you can afford it, you can keep doing it. But you don't have to, because again, death is something that we all have to go through, and so the family doesn't have the moral obligation to go bankrupt in order to keep a family member alive when they cannot do it, right? And so John Paul II said that as long as somebody can be sick, and just regular feeding the person, even if it's a tube feeding, that's not healthcare as much as it is just attending to the needs of someone who is in need of help. So that has to be provided. It's like changing the sheets in the hospital, all those different things that we do around the sick person, even though that person cannot do it himself, that has to be always provided. But when it comes to maintaining someone alive by the means of machinery and all this modern technology, the time will come when you will have to ask yourself, is this leading to healing or not? The person is unconscious, they're perhaps suffering, whatever it is, and the doctors will basically have no reasonable expectation of recovery. Then it is okay morally to disconnect the person from those artificial means of keeping him alive. Okay? Any question on this? No? There was an issue some time ago, I remember a discussion, I think it was in England, where the boy was denied of health care because it meant tube feeding. And I believe it was in England. There was a big outcry about that, and rightly so, because tube feeding is just like any feeding. A person who cannot eat, and sometimes you have to help them physically to do that because they are unable to. Someone may not have hands. So that's a different issue, but they kind of rush to the conclusion that now we can just allow the kid to die, even though it wouldn't take much to just give him food. Okay, so there are distinctions, but usually hospitals usually have ethical team that will discuss those issues when the time comes, and they would advise the family. I hope they follow the Christian Catholic guidelines when it comes to those things.
There are two kinds of death, brain death and heart death. If the person is brain dead, is that in our religion dead? Because it could be heart still going, kidneys working, but nothing with the brain.
Yeah, is that person with that brain able to live without artificial means of?
No.
Exactly. So if the doctors say, well, that the brain damage is, maybe he will recover, maybe there's a hope that it may happen within a certain amount of time, but very often they will tell you there's no way. And so again, you don't have to maintain the person keep going, forever if there's no reasonable expectation. Okay, but again, if you can make a mistake, the doctor can make a mistake, we all make mistakes, but in your conscience, in your ethical procedures, you have to keep that in mind. That your honesty is very important. That you are not rushing to pull that plug because you just feel like, okay, we're done here. If the doctor says, no, we have a good chance to recover, it may take a long time perhaps, but you can. And so that's the difference, right?
What does the church say about tube feeding? Because tube feeding can last for 5 years, because I've seen it myself.
Right. But tube feeding is not a medical procedure, as it is just regular attending to the need of the sick. There are many sick people who cannot make it on their own.
Right.
They need nurses, they need, family members to provide for them, And so feeding is part of it. So you cannot just disconnect feeding a person if that's the way for him to live, as everybody else is eating, right?
But she lived as, from bed to chair and with ulcerations in her mouth and in her body.
That doesn't make any
That's not
difference.
living.
Again, that's precisely the issue. Sometimes people rush to the decision based on, I just don't want this inconvenience in my house anymore, right? That's not a justification to end somebody's life. Somebody is disabled, and you may say, well, that person cannot make it on his or her own, and therefore, let's see what we can do here. And then we go to the issue of euthanasia, which, as you know, the church forbids. So you don't speed up somebody's death because it causes you inconvenience to take care of that person. That's what they are now pushing in many countries in Europe. In Canada, I believe now it's already the case, where even a young person can decide that I want to end my life, right? And so this famous case of physician-assisted suicide, which when I was in Detroit, when Dr. Kevorkian was doing his rounds in his van, and basically killing people all over the place. And he lost the case, so they lost the case. Because again, this is, one thing is not being able to take care of yourself and needing somebody's help. Another thing is being connected to all kind of devices, expensive ones, and that procedure never leading to healing, right? You may allow that person to die. And some sick people will say, I don't need that. It's time for me to go, right? But it's not him committing suicide. It's just him allowing himself for the body to basically take care of itself. Whereas depriving somebody of food, even if it's artificial ways of feeding that person, that's a different story. Okay. So somebody, and again, the issue of euthanasia very often has to do with suffering. Like, I just want to take this person out of the misery, or release myself from the burden of taking care of him or her, right? So let's just encourage grandma to to go to a doctor and do the euthanasia. And again, in Canada, I believe it's now the case where even the minor person can do it. So it's just crazy. So again, we live in the world where suffering it's tremendous inconvenience for people, and that we just don't want to deal with it. And so let's just speed things up. And you know the difference here? Can you see the difference? So the suffering itself is not justified. It doesn't justify euthanasia or speeding up the process of dying. Okay? Because you may have a person who is not suffering, doesn't feel any pain, in the end is alive and can do just fine, but needs a little bit of help, such as tube feeding or any type of taking care of. So, okay. Any questions again on that? All right. You may have later questions, but let's now move to the point of the person is dying. And those of you who have someone who is you are taking care of an older person who is declining in mental capacity, unable to go to church, cannot go to confession, cannot receive the sacraments, you make sure that you call the parish, and we will make sure that that person is provided spiritually for that moment. If you cannot confess your sins because you already lost your mind, you don't remember, you have dementia, and so we have the sacrament, and it's called the apostolic absolution, where that sacrament is going to take care of it. Even if the person cannot go to confession anymore, their sins will be absolved. The anointing of the sig itself has the power to forgive sins. So I can be unconscious. If I am, call the priest. Please do. Make sure that I am. The sacraments are being administrated to me, and don't wait till the last moment. In the last, I don't know how many weeks now, I get a lot of phone calls from people who are desperate to find a priest. And they cannot find any priest around because somebody's dying and they requested the sacraments. So we are not as available as we used to be. So don't wait for the last moment when somebody's already, trying to catch the last breath, and then you look for the priest. You may not get lucky. Okay. And so again, somebody's dying. Make sure that spiritually they're provided for. Call the priest. Call the parish. Encourage the person to go to confession if they still can talk and still are conscious. Start talking about death. I know it's very unpopular now to talk about death, and that's why very often in the funeral homes use the term celebration of life, the funeral, the celebration of life. That celebration of life for a person who died, for the soul of the deceased, means nothing. It means nothing. All they need is prayers at this point. You can have your drinks and enjoy, the memory of the deceased person, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But to replace that, or replace the funeral and the funeral mass for the deceased with that, that's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. That's not how we Christians do things, because of our faith, because we believe that there's life after. Speaking of the life after now, you know that there's one thing that distinguishes human beings from any other being. I know not just the brain, that we are capable of doing things and build things, but also we are spiritual beings, and that is being reflected in the way we treat the dead. We bury the dead, and very often in different cultures, in different times, you go thousands of years ago, you find a grave, and there are always signs of ritual burying of the dead. There's always some kind of religious element to it. Doesn't matter what religion, okay? And even people who are not religious, there's something about the dignity of human body, that we have this natural kind of instinct of making sure that the body is not desecrated, that we bury it properly, that it's done with respect. From our Christian perspective, it's because we believe that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. There's something sacred about our bodies. We receive the body of Christ. He becomes part of us. And so for those and so many other reasons, the burial has to be very respectful of that faith that we have. Even if the person perhaps doesn't have faith, nevertheless, continues to be God's creation, right? And we are the temples of the Holy Spirit. So now we're going to more specific issues as when it comes to burial. I know the funeral home will probably have more to say about that, but from the Catholic perspective, we, up till 1963, the cremation was not allowed in the Catholic Church. Now it is allowed. A variety of reasons. One, we have deeper understanding of what resurrection is and what it does. Before, if people think that, okay, if I cremate my body, how is it going to be resurrected? Well, if you don't cremate the body is still going to decay, and there is nothing going to be left of it. It's the given time, right? So it's not due, and it's underestimating God's power of creation. Created the universe out of nothing. He can restore our body from the elements that may not be physically visible anymore. And so, for that reason, but also in many places, big cities, for example, they run out of space for cemeteries. And you have, like big buildings in some cities, which are basically a cemetery, right? You go and you have very limited space. So for that reason as well, the cremation is allowed. However, and that's the most important part, the ashes still have to be buried. You cannot store them in your house. You cannot make jewelry out of them, because I know that some people do. You cannot just spray them, splash them wherever it is. I know many people do. That the church doesn't allow that. Again, because of the dignity of those ashes being part of the person. Some people, for sentimental reasons, may want to keep them in their homes. Not a good idea, because eventually somebody else is going to have to take care of it, and very often they don't know what to do with it. They store it somewhere in the, a closet or in the basement, whatever it is. Spraying ashes all over the place, bad idea, because it's not a sacred place. We bless the cemetery. We bless the place where the body is going to be buried. Again, for the same reason, because of the sacredness of human life. That includes not just the soul, but the body as well. So all those practices that in our modern culture became so commonplace now, and I dealt with some family members who insisted on it. I cannot, as a priest, forbid them because they're the owners of it. But I have to say, this is not the right way to do it. They may not like it, but I have to say it. And unfortunately, very often they just still do whatever they want to do. But I'm aware of instances where the family comes to a priest and says, "Father, I don't know what to do with it. The family is gone, the grandma, the grandpa, whatever, they died, but we have those ashes here. What do I do with them?" They don't know what to do with them. So for the first generation, perhaps, they still will kind of keep it in a dignified place, which again is not allowed by the church. But what about the next generations? You are kind of leaving them with this burden of taking care of it later, which is not a good thing. Okay. And then making jewelry with ashes. What about giving them the rest that they deserve, right? So.
How often can you receive the sacrament of anointing of the sick?
Okay, so you can receive it as often as you can. Meaning, if let's say I anoint you because of your old age, you feel, it's a sacrament of healing. It's not the sacrament of dying. So you can receive the sacrament, and then you decay in your health, then you can receive it again. But you wouldn't do it like every week. It's usually something you don't do often. But so, and then you may have. I don't want to say who that was, but I had a situation where the person was requesting the anointing all the time to avoid the purgatory or whatever. And at one point, as a priest, you have to say, I think you're already taken care of. So, but I admire the person's desire to, go straight to heaven, sure. And that's what we believe. You receive the absolution, the apostolic absolution. That will put you in heaven right away. That's what the church believes. Just as if you receive the plenary indulgence and then die, that's what it is about. The church, God is giving the church the authority to provide people with all those opportunities. Like now we have the year of the Jubilee year, very special time to obtain the indulgences. Do it. Resurrection, the Church of Resurrections, down the road. Use it as often as you can. I will go there after every confession and take advantage of it.
When you give the healing blessing, is that like, I'm having surgery tomorrow and I come and ask you for a healing blessing?
Yep.
That's separate from, you're not giving me an apostolic blessing at the same time.
No.
So if I'm calling a priest to come and someone's at home and that I'm taking care of, and I don't know what's gonna happen, do I ask for a healing blessing? Or do I ask or want someone to ask for me the apostolic blessing? Well,
I would probably give you the apostolic blessing because there's a danger of death as you go through surgery. Depends what kind of surgery. If it's a plastic surgery, most likely not. But if it's a life-threatening surgery, I would probably give you the absolution, the apostolic absolution with it. Instead, even if you go anoint someone, in most cases, if I feel like the person can confess sins, I will ask them, do you have a need to go to confession? I would say 50-50. People will say yes or no. But if somebody's not in their minds, drugged up, with the pipes in the mouth, what's the use? He cannot talk, he cannot. So, and that's why we have those extraordinary means of giving them absolution, and their sins will be forgiven. So, right? But going back to the cremation, so the normal way is to, of course, the burial, the traditional way, but we also allow now cremation after 1963. with the condition that those ashes will be buried and not just kept or whatever. Okay.
Just for my own clarification, because I do like to share the church's preference, the cremated remains are to stay whole as they're buried, correct? They're not supposed to be split up like family takes
I know
a
people
portion,
do
or-
that. They want to bury someone in here and in a different town because there's the family's there. I didn't find anything specific from the church on that, as long as they bury it.
Okay.
And then they should be buried within a reasonable time. The best is the very same day, but sometimes because of the logistics of it, family members are somewhere else, they would like to be there, and so it is allowed to keep them for a while, but it has to be a reasonable time, like not 5 years or so, and I had those cases as well, which is not recommended. Again, the family, they own the ashes, they do with them what they wish, but me as a priest, I have to instruct them that this is not the best way. Because again, you don't know what's going to happen within that lapse of God knows how long. And again, the dignity of the human person is at play. And then you have, so that's the cremation part. Then you have this, somebody asked me, I think Dorothy was asking me about the so-called green funerals. Do you guys have much of those still yet?
We don't have a green cemetery in our area. Are there green options? Depends on what that looks like.
Yeah.
That means something different for everyone, so it depends on what that means.
But basically what it is, it's to be eco-friendly. That's probably most of people do it for that reason. If they do it because of that, there are good chances they're not very good Catholics. And they're more into New Age and stuff like that. But that burial of that way, the green funeral, it is permissible by the church. As a matter of fact, that was the way before. They invented the embalments and all those things. So it was a natural way to bury someone. So there's nothing wrong with it.
Can you explain that a little bit? What is that?
Well, very often they use just a cloth kind of sack, biodegradable. That would be a problem with the funeral mass in the church. They would probably have to rent a casket for the funeral part of it, for mass, but then they can just use that and put the body directly in the ground without any protection. Now, it depends on the different cities and different procedures and regulations. It may not be allowed in many places. That's why she's talking about those specific places where it is allowed. And it's becoming more and more popular now. Well, it used to be that way. My family members were, except for my stepfather now, who was cremated. But again, the preference when it comes to cremation is that there's still present body for the mass, and then they cremate the body. But also the ashes present, that's also allowable. So either way. But again, there's a preference, and then there's a secondary way.
Are you familiar with this other, I can't remember what it's called right now, but they call it a green funeral, they liquefy it?
Yeah, that's not allowed by church. As far as I know, it's not allowed. Because what you do is, what do you do with the liquid then? You dispose it. It's not burial. So it's not a funeral, it becomes a disposing of the body. And as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong.
I've heard it's wrong, but I just want to keep a bit confused.
Right, so there are different ways. So one is the green funeral is basically body without any artificial embalmment or anything. Putting in the soil so it disintegrates naturally and it's environmentally friendly, right? So that's one thing. But now they invented the idea of liquefying the body. So it's not a cremation, it's liquefying, it dissolves the body flesh. And then they also use it for fertilizer and all kind of stuff. So that's not allowed by the church as far as I know.
So for a Catholic mass, they are not to be cremated before the mass?
Either way.
Oh, either way.
So the preference is that the body is present at mass, and then you can cremate it. And that's what my family did with my stepfather. And then they cremated the body, and then they buried the ashes. But you can also cremate the body before, and then have the funeral mass with the ashes present. So that's normal. Most common, that's what they do. And again, the idea of embalmment and cremation very often has to do with the availability of the family for the funeral, because they're all over the place, they would like to come, and so how long do you store the body, right? Before the embalmment, like when I was growing up in Poland, the funeral would be done on the third day, because after that you could smell the person badly. And so the funeral was quick. I think they still do it in Peru in most places where the poor people cannot afford certain things. So the burial happens like very quickly. Yeah. And what else? And then who can benefit from Catholic funeral? Ordinarily Catholics, but also any baptized person. You know, it's a work of charity to bury the dead. It's one of the acts of corporal act of mercy to bury the person. The church traditionally would refuse the funerals for heretics who were denouncing the faith or renouncing the faith, or notorious unrepentant sinners, public sinners. Then the church would refuse the funeral, the Christian burial.
Suicide?
Not anymore. I know there was a time when the church would not do that. Now, with understanding what people go through with depression and all that, they're not in their right minds. The church doesn't judge the person's state of mind when they do that. So now we do funerals.
Father, what about a Catholic that is not practicing their faith? Can they be buried in the church?
Well, when I was growing up, the priest would probably not do it.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen it in church where that person was not practicing, was not receiving priest visit or whatever, and they would refuse it. And I think there's still that kind of a stigma. Older people, I have cases of people who were not practicing, but at the end of life, they were kind of terrified by the idea of not being buried in the Catholic Church, and they would ask me that question. I would say, "Don't worry, I will bury you." So, yeah, it's not about vengeance of any kind. It's, in a sense, it would be respecting somebody's will. If the whole life the person was not interested in faith and in church, whatever, atheist, refusing or not, whatever reason, why would that person be then receiving a Christian burial, right? Because it is a rite of Christian burial, so the person has to be baptized.
It's easier to live a non-Catholic life than die Catholic.
Yeah, I think I buried someone who wasn't Catholic before, but usually it's like you have a mixed marriage. Somebody's Catholic is married to non-Catholic, and they never became Catholic. They will be buried in the Catholic Church, no problem. They could be, yeah. Oh, yeah. No problem. If that's what the family does, because sometimes they may say no, that person will be buried in the Lutheran Church, which is fine as well.
Jewish person also can get a Christian burial?
No. Or Hindu doesn't believe in God like we do, and then one God in two persons, not. I don't think they would even want to.
Well, if you were married to a Catholic and a Jewish married to each other, and she was alive and he died, and if she wanted him to have a
Yeah,
Christian
what
burial.
we believe as we profess in one baptism. So if that person is Christian, even though it may not be Catholic, the baptism is recognized by the Catholic Church. In some cases it is not. Like Mormons, we do not recognize their baptism. Jehovah's Witnesses, we do not recognize their baptism, even though they believe they are Christians, but they're not. Because they don't share the same faith when it comes to the Trinity and the divinity of Christ. The Jehovah's Witnesses specifically deny the divinity of Christ, which is a heresy. Okay? Anything else? I think I covered most of it. And also, something that is probably not the case here, but what about the babies? Like someone, the baby was stillborn or miscarriage, whatever. The church would like them to be also buried and receive the Christian burial. Miscarriages, very often, we have the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse. They will accommodate you. They're ready to do it for you. They have a place for those babies there. And I had a case like this before.
We actually offer that service.
Yeah.
We're the only funeral in town that does that, for the local families
Yeah.
here in town.
There's actually an organization that make small coffins for the babies, free of charge. I don't know what the contact information is, but they do that. Because, anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Are all the cemeteries blessed? Like, even if you're Catholic and you're buried in a not a Catholic cemetery, can the priest still bury you and bless you there? Bless that?
So if it's not a Catholic cemetery, the priest is going to bless the grave,
Oh,
for sure.
they
Yeah.
can.
They will.
Oh, they will.
Yep. So if I go to a cemetery and I'm not sure if it's a Catholic cemetery, I will ask. If they don't know, I will still bless it. But if it's a Catholic cemetery, it's already blessed. All right?
Thank you, Father.
Very good.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anna Zaromsky-Lindy. I'm a certified pre-planner consultant, technically, Peterson Kramer. It's so wonderful to be here. So I actually went to school here a little over 30 years ago, so it is so wonderful to see this new gathering space that you all have. I've worked many a church picnics and served chicken dinners and all of that when I was younger, so it's just a beautiful space that you have here now. So, so my job as a pre-planner is to talk about the sometimes very difficult task of our own mortality. And just think about how we want to be remembered through our funeral or memorial service. So, as well as potentially setting funds aside for those services that are associated with your final wishes. So, why pre-planning and pre-funding, why is that important? Show of hands, how many people think pre-planning is important? Wow, that's almost everybody. That's amazing. So, right, experts say about 70% of people think pre-planning is important. So how many people do you think actually have pre-planned their funeral? Any ideas?
I would say about half of the population, because we're more aware of death. You never talked about death in my youth growing up. It was a forbidden subject.
Sure.
But now people
So
are
taboo,
talking
right?
about
Yeah.
it.
Yep, a lot more, definitely. Any other guesses? Okay, 5%.
Oh,
5% actually pre-fund their funeral. However, I do recognize quite a few faces in here, so I would say that that number might be a little inaccurate today. So, which is wonderful that some of you have actually taken that step to do that. It's great. So, why the gap? Why do we think it's important, but we don't actually do it? So, well, it's uncomfortable, right? We don't want to talk about it. Like you just said, it was something we didn't talk about before. It's not something we want to think about. So, or maybe you think, I don't want all the fuss. It's gonna be simple. There's not a lot of details. We don't really need to worry about that. Someone else can take care of that for us. The family can take care of it. So they can, and many have, because there aren't prearrangements in place. But if we think about this, for your spouse, your children or parents, your death is possibly the worst day of their lives, okay? Like I mentioned, whether you choose to be cremated or you have a traditional service, there's a viewing, whether you want your funeral to be big, small, elaborate, or simple, decisions have to be made. And usually within a short time, like you said, a couple days,
Funerals can take place a couple days after, but those plans have to start right away. So, all right, I'm gonna change gears here a little. I'm assuming some of you have in the room have planned a funeral or a wedding before, right? How long does it take us to plan a wedding? Months, year, right? Yeah. So it takes some time, right? How long do we have to plan a funeral?
Couple days.
Days, right. So, what kind of things do we plan for in a wedding?
Music, flowers,
Music, flowers, good.
and tuxedos.
Not for
Clothing.
guys.
Yeah.
Guys don't care if you're about flowers.
Invitations, sure. So, let's consider weddings and funerals are they're a little similar, right? So we need to know when and where we're gonna hold our funeral. We need to know music, there's readings, there's scripture, there's flowers, there's our luncheon. So when we talk about a funeral, there are all these different items that we've talked about. And then we have merchandise, if you need a casket or a vault, there's an urn, cemetery space, there's a monument. But all of these things you have to decide within a very short time frame. Okay, we don't have that full year to decide these things. So in addition to those items, there's also biographical information that we have to collect, okay? So this is gonna be your personal information that we're gonna need. So that's for your obituary as well as your death certificate, okay? So that would include like the city you're born, the state you lived in, your mother's maiden name. So these are all things that you know off the top of your head. However, if you have a strong European background like I do, last names get a little complicated. I've got scriptshack in there, so many consonants in there. Could I spell it? I can, but it'll take me a little while. That's my grandmother's maiden name. So you know all these spellings, but your family might struggle with that a little bit. So just having that basic information can really help. So I just always think that scripture, I always throw an extra Z in there. So, but it's just, you're 100% right. These are legal documents and we need to take them very seriously. But it's a very simple thing that we can do for our family. So that person that's responsible for your funeral, will they be able to do these spellings? Will they know this information? Having it in place, written down in advance is very helpful. So when we look at that worst day for them, it's something that they just don't even have to think about. Mom and Dad took care of that for me. Also, wouldn't you rather discuss these options while your family is still here? So you guys can talk about it. Whether you'd like to, how, I guess the way I look at it is, how would I want my final wishes carried out? Do they know that? If we don't talk about it with our kids, they may not know what our final wishes are. So sparing them that disagreement, okay? So I hate to admit, but we do see families come to blows about these sorts of things at the funeral home. There's a lot of different opinions, okay? I have 4 amazing children, okay? When it comes to dinner time and we're having pizza, pizza night, that should be easy. Having them all agree on the topping of pizza for the evening can be a challenge, right? Like, one wants cheese, one wants pepperoni, what are we gonna do here? So if you think about putting all those children in the same room and I haven't had a hard decision like this, how are they gonna decide what's right or wrong, okay? I know it's a little more serious than pizza, but it's the reality of where we are. So if they can't decide on that, what would it look like without talking to you? So just really the importance of taking the time to discuss these things and make your decisions and share them with them. And also with us at the funeral home, okay? So they're all in one place, so when that time comes, it's easier for them. So this is just it's truly an incredible gift for them. Recently I had a mother come in with her 2 adult children. The daughter was actually an organist for one of the local churches, and she kind of knew the flow of the service. This wasn't too bad. The son, not so much. And he's like, gosh, I never thought about all these questions that you're asking right now. I'm so grateful that my mom is sitting here and we can say, what exactly do you want, Mom? Just some things that I never would have thought of. So, and that goes for myself too. A couple of years ago, I sat down with my parents. It's emotional, right? I don't want to think about my parents passing away, but they both had two different points of view on what their services look like. I would have had no idea. I thought this is what it was going to be, and it wasn't. So without having that conversation with them, I wouldn't have known. So it's so important to have that conversation. Doesn't need to be over Christmas dinner or anything like that, but just here and there, when you see each other, just having small conversations about it. It just really, it helps that peace of mind for your loved ones. So where do we go from here? I recommend that you think about what type of service that you want. Even if you're not sure of what that looks like, there's a lot of different options. But we're here to help you organize your thoughts. I am Catholic, I have a background on all those things Father just talked to you about. So when you have any questions, we can talk about that and you can talk to Father. We all need to work together and make sure that your wishes are carried out the way that you want. It's really very important. So pre-planning is just truly a lot of information gathering, not only that services, but that background information. So it's an evolving thing. Life is always changing, and your pre-planning can change too. It doesn't have to be set in stone. You can always make changes as time goes on because our lives change. So nothing wrong with that. But at least we can get the information documented, and it's a great starting point for your families. It's a guide for them, okay? So letting your family know about these ideas, and then even if you're not comfortable with that, jotting them down. Jot your ideas down, and then share them, okay? So on that worst day, your family has a place to start with, okay? And what's meaningful for you? They'll know what those things are. But pre-planning is just one part of your funeral planning, all right? There's also pre-funding, okay? And I know they're gonna talk about that in a little bit, but I'm just gonna touch real briefly on that. Can anyone guess what an average traditional funeral is gonna cost today? Not including a headstone or cemetery space, just your service and casket. Any ideas?
15,000.
Yeah.
That's good. Any other thoughts? What's that?
How much?
It's around $10,000 for those items, all right? And then we add in other costs, like those things we talked about before, like flowers, luncheon, things like that. We're looking anywhere from 12 to 18,000. So Father's right on the money, right in the middle there. So 12 to 18,000 for a complete traditional ceremony. So who thinks that funeral cost is less than it was in 2004? Okay, I'm gonna say no one. Okay, right. It was about $5,500 back then, all right? So who thinks that in 2030, a funeral is gonna be less than it is today? Right, it's not, so.
Excuse me, is the cremation less expensive than the traditional?
So that's where people say, I want to be cremated, it's cheaper, right? From our perspective, there's still a lot that goes into it. We have different packages depending on what type of cremation you're looking at. A traditional service followed by a cremation is going to be very similar to a traditional service. Memorial service, you're going to be eliminating the casket and the vault, so that's where that price difference comes into play, is the merchandise, okay? So maybe you're looking more around that 10,000 mark for a memorial service?
Yeah.
So, okay. It's a good question. So experts always tell us that funerals are gonna double every 10 years. That's just typically how that works. As far as pricing goes, we know rising costs are a reality that we all live with every day. So whether it's the cost of the car, the gas we put in our car, whether it's a hospital or nursing home cost or the price of a funeral, things just are increasing. So, but we can't be sure about though is our physical or financial circumstances later on, or whether we're gonna need long-term care, or nursing home care later on. So does anyone here know what the term irrevocable means?
You cannot change it?
Correct, can't be revoked, right? So what does that mean in terms of pre-funding a funeral? Means that the money that you set aside is gonna be set up irrevocably to pre-fund your funeral. So those funds can't be used for anything else except for your funeral at the time of your services. So what happens is whether you need to apply, if you were to plan, apply for medical assistance, they can't take that money away from you, okay? So it's not considered an asset. So a couple things to keep in mind when we're pre-funding a funeral. When you do that through a Peterson Kramer, meets medical assistance guidelines, and we can guarantee funeral services. So that's not something you can do other than at the funeral home. So the money you set aside is 100% put into a funeral trust. They're put in your name as well, and the proceeds are assigned at the time of the funeral, all right? So it's important to remember that any of the funding that you do, it's in your name, it's portable, meaning you can use it anywhere. So if you decide you're tired of winter here and you want to move to Arizona, you can use it anywhere, okay? But more importantly, it's irrevocable, okay? So I want to thank you all for inviting me here and having me today. So hopefully some good information for you. Understanding the importance of what we do for pre-planning a funeral and pre-funding. Yes?
In that irrevocable trust.
Yep.
It accrues interest, does it not?
It does, yes. It does. Yep. So to offset that inflation that we have. So it's not, I had a gentleman say, well, I can make more at Edward Jones, and yes, you can, but this is not a way for you to make money. It's a way for you to put funds aside for your funeral.
Is it
Yes.
the same as a life insurance?
It is not. It is not. So they'll be talking about that afterwards. So, yep, there's different options to do that. Absolutely. Yes. Oh, sorry, I have to.
My grandmother lived a little while, almost 103.
Oh, wow.
They had pre-planned her funeral quite a few years earlier. Had the stone, had everything, and the money grew in the account.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally got it straightened out when a later member died with both of them had irrevocable trust. The first case with my grandmother, it had grown so much that it not only paid for the funeral and the meal and the flowers and money for the officiator and money, but there was $900 left,
Great. So great pre-planner you have
which
there.
went to the state.
So she was on medical assistance. Sure.
Which went to the state. Now, when the other member of the family had the same situation and didn't live to over 100, but lived to 94, we told the funeral director, how can we spend this? Because he had excess money too.
Okay.
Well, I didn't know this. If he wasn't on medical assistance, what happens to the money?
It'll go back to the family then.
It will go back to the family.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Right.
Well, in that case, we spend it lavishly, and there didn't have excess when we and the undertaker had a whole bunch of people for a decent meal.
Sure.
He mentioned pizza
Sure.
at
Sure.
a very good pizza place.
Yeah.
They didn't have any problem finding something that they liked.
Sure.
But that is something that needs to be pointed out, that there can be lost money if you're on medical assistance.
Right, for medical assistance, yep, and, we do, set things up a little differently now, so I don't know how that was set up.
Oh, the
but,
first case was over 20 years ago.
Okay, sure. So yeah, everyone it's case by case and just kind of how the funeral home sets it up, but, you know, what I do is, you know, we talk about that background information and then we can come up with an estimate based on the type of services. The luncheon is really a big one, you know, before COVID, we did a lot of church luncheons, and you guys get to do that here, which is so wonderful. Not all churches can, so they might have to cater in, which gets a little pricier. So it always helps when you do pre-fund to check on it. Some people don't wanna see me anymore after that, and I understand, but it doesn't hurt to check in to see where your trust is at. Is there enough in there? Do I need to add to it, or are you doing okay? It can always help, so.
What amount, if someone came to you today, in this case, there's two of us, we would want separate accounts, right?
Yes, you would each have one in your own names.
What is a normal amount that people put down? Or is there no normal?
Yeah, I know, people ask me, oh, just give me a ballpark, Anna. It's so hard because, you know, are you having it in a church? Is it, you know, at the funeral home? You know, what does that look like as far as the service goes? Because, you know, are you having a lunch or not a lunch? Is it a traditional service or cremation? All those factors are gonna change the price. If you're being buried or not, all those, you know, cemetery fees, and any merchandise. So it all just kind of depends, but I mean, it can be anywhere from $4,000 and I've seen up to $35,000. So it just depends on how simple or elaborate you wanna go.
And both of us have an insurance policy that in our mind has been a death policy for
Sure.
a long time. Is that, you know, you aren't gonna have your money the day after the funeral because it takes time for the processing by the insurance company.
Right.
Is that an acceptable way of doing it, having a certain amount down and the funeral home knows about this policy, which is going to finish off?
Sure, no, that's a good question. With our funeral home, I can't speak for other funeral homes, but, you know, you can use life insurance as long as it's still in force. Our preference is to have a specific amount at the time of the services. So, I mean, that's something we can talk about if you bring that in. The worry is, again, when they're not irrevocable, we don't know if that'll be in force at the time. So we don't know what those policies are gonna do over time. But yeah, the short answer, yes. So, yeah. And then you had a question in the back, yeah.
You make payments into that trust?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you don't need to put all the money up front. Never want to put anyone in a financial burden. You would just add to it when you can. Yep. It's a really good question too, so. All right, yes.
If you have leftover money, you just make a bigger check out to the church for the service.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's a very good thing.
Yes, we've done that, yeah, absolutely, so. Well, if you received one of my folders, I have a gift for you in there, which is a personal guide to pre-planning your funeral. I really recommend you fill that out. If you don't want to fill out all those pages, there's a simple form in there. Just fill out that background information. That is all the information we're going to use for that death certificate and your obituary, okay? Very helpful, especially if the maiden name is Scripture, okay? You'll have that written down on there, okay? And really, you're halfway done if you have that completed, which is great. So, if you do make an appointment with me, I promise we keep it light. We might even joke a little, but it's really about us just getting to know each other and what your final wishes are. So, and really, it's providing that peace of mind for your family. Okay, so if you have any other questions, I'll be sticking around. But again, thank you so much for having me today. So.
Thank you, Anna. Wonderful information.
really ties in well as we wrap up the end of life workshop today with really what it says there, planning for God's blessings. Are you ready? Father talked about, again, the spiritual side, making decisions, and Anna, again, certainly the end-of-life decisions that need to be made. And I'll talk again about God's blessings that have been bestowed on all of us. Whether there are a lot of blessings or not a lot of blessings, we need some direction to where those go, and that's what we'll talk about here today. I am John Tetzloff. I've been at this for about 30 years, so I love speaking in front of groups about this particular topic, and I think you'll get some good information with this, along with what Father and Anna talked about as well. One word I want you to come out of this workshop, though, remembering. Huge word. Communication. Okay? Do you know anybody that has spoken from the grave? Nope. Okay? There's also situations in our life where we may not be dead yet, but can't communicate. Father talked again about Alzheimer's and those chronic illnesses that maybe don't allow us to communicate. That's the importance of this planning, is letting someone else know what you want. Because there may be a day when you can't make that decision anymore, or that final day where you certainly are done making decisions. Okay? That's what this is all about. We can always make our own decisions, we can make comments, we can talk to people, we can, write a check for a funeral if we want to. Okay? And I think that's a great plan. But when we can't communicate, someone else has to do that for us. And if we don't leave a plan behind, if we don't name somebody to do that, that makes life really tough for those that we maybe leave behind. So why do we have a plan? And I do use the screen a little bit, so hopefully you can kind of see some of the words and stuff there. But why have a plan? And the biggest reason, I think, is I want to make that process easy. I have 3 boys, Anna. They're young adult men, obviously, but I don't want them to have to sit around the proverbial kitchen table when I and my wife are gone, and our stuff, whatever that is in the middle of that table, and now they have to make those decisions without any direction from me or my spouse. That's not a good situation to be in. Who else is usually part of that decision? If I have 3 boys, who else is usually part of that decision?
In-laws.
The in-laws. Okay? So now I got 6 people probably trying to make those decisions. Okay? Think about that. If we could look down from heaven someday and see our kids having to do that, I want to make that process easy. Okay?
I have to go, but since you've mentioned that, I can tell you from experience, that situation, if you don't take care of it, then divides the family.
Yeah.
They're going to fight over this, and it's not a good thing.
Yes.
After all, it's money.
Yeah. What's that?
Money.
Yeah, money kind of changes us a little bit too, doesn't it? Especially when mom and dad, who are kind of driving all the decisions and driving the concepts and the thoughts, they're gone. It's now left up to, again, a lot more people. I want to avoid expenses. I don't want to have my kids have to go hire attorneys and accountants and all this stuff and legal fees if I don't have to. Thank you for the comment about charitable. If I am charitable, if I want to leave a legacy to my church or my missions or my charities someday, I got to tell somebody. Okay? I got to tell somebody I want that to happen. And we have a whole other workshop about legacy planning, so I won't get into that a lot today at all, but you got to communicate that as well. It just doesn't happen. Okay? And then lastly, gentleman over there said he used this, I use this a lot in my workshops, the conflict. I want to help avoid conflict if I can. And think of it this way, it's pretty easy if the only assets I have in my estate are cash. Okay? So, 1, 2, 3, 5. You're 5 of my kids today. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. All right? So my 5 kids say, I have $500,000 in cash, life insurance, annuities. I die, what do they each get? 100 grand, right? 5 divided by 500. Pretty easy. But what if I now place in the middle of that table a house, a cabin, farmland, a timeshare down in Florida? Now what do they each own after I'm gone? 1/5 of an asset. That gets a little bit more problematic, and that's where a lot of the conflict can come into play. So we'll talk about that. These are the documents that everybody needs to make sure their plan is legal, efficient, and again, communicates their wishes. Incapacity documents are those documents that say I'm not dead, but I can't communicate anymore. Who's going to make those decisions for me? So we'll talk briefly about that. Now I'm dead, I need another document that says, who do I name to take care of my affairs for me? If we do not have a will or a plan, we die in what's called intestate. And now, who makes the decisions for our family at that point in time? State of Wisconsin, or Minnesota, or wherever we are. So we want to have direction there. Beneficiary designations are so important. Beneficiary designations would be things on life insurance, IRAs, 401ks, retirement plans, all have a beneficiary. And here's again a very important piece of information to keep with you and think about. A beneficiary does not talk to your will. Let me say that again. Your will does not drive your beneficiaries. They don't talk to each other. Therefore, if I have life insurance, annuities, IRAs, and I have a will, they're different pieces of paper. They don't match each other. So it's very important to make sure that our beneficiary designations are correct and match what our planning is. Very important. A trust. There's many kinds of trust. Anna mentioned an irrevocable trust. Okay? I'll talk about one other kind of, maybe two kinds of trusts that are really cool planning tools for the right situation. They're not for everybody. And then end of life directions. I won't spend a lot of time on that. Anna did a great job with that already. But just the importance of having a plan, and I love the way she said this, providing a really meaningful gift to those people that have to make those decisions for you someday when you're gone. My mother-in-law died about 5 years ago, and luckily I got to her and did all the planning and went to the funeral home and got everything. She died. I was able to be with my wife and her 4 siblings in the room with the funeral director. He pulled out his file and he said, all the decisions are made. That was cool. Down to what mom wanted to wear, the flowers, hymns, all of that was done. So us 5 kids, or there were about 7 of us in there, didn't have to make that decision. And my mother-in-law opted to use life insurance to fund her funeral. The funeral home got in touch with the life insurance company. They sent the proceeds to pay off her funeral. We never wrote a check. That is also pretty cool. So again, talk to Anna about this stuff. It's so important. It's easy to do. Have the courage to get it done. Because if Anna's statistics are right, and only 5% of us have done this planning, that ain't enough. Okay? And I'm not trying to be preachy, I've lived this for 30 years and I think it's important. So, all right.
Does a beneficiary, I'll just use life insurance.
Yeah.
It's almost like taking it out of the pot before the will.
Yes. Yes.
That the will has nothing to do
Exactly
with the
right.
beneficiary.
Exactly right.
It's like extracting that part of the estate.
It's not part of the will. It's not part of the assets your will directs. Therefore, it is an asset. It needs to be taken care of differently through the beneficiary. But again, we need to make sure the beneficiaries are correct and they're where we want them to go.
Kept current.
Current, yeah. I've seen so many. Yeah. I've seen so many adults my age, I'm 60, and I look at their beneficiaries, and who is their beneficiary? It's their mom and dad.
They're gone.
Yep. And so now we got an issue, because the insurance company doesn't know where they're to pay that money. And that defaults to probate, which we'll talk about in a second, and probate is something we may want to avoid. Okay? So again, it's very important. So first ones I talked about are called incapacity documents, 2 of them. One of them deals with health care issues. It's called an Advanced Health Care Directive. It's a document that says if I cannot make my medical decisions by myself, Who do I want to step in to talk to my doc, talk to my medical providers on what should happen? Okay? In your blue folders that Vicki gave you, there is actually an example of a Catholic healthcare directive. Very important. You want to name somebody, usually your spouse, if that's your desire, but always have a backup as well. Because if my wife and I are driving home from a movie one night and we get in a car accident and I get killed and she's now disabled and I was named her only healthcare agent, now what? Now the kids have to go to court to get approved as a healthcare agent of mine. That's a pain in the butt. Okay? So always have backups. But this again gives you your healthcare agent the power to make those decisions. You think communication is important at this point? Because you want to make sure that if you name somebody as someone that's going to make these decisions for them, you got to tell them. Okay? Worst thing is you're a child of your parent and you're in the hospital with them and the doc says, oh, I see the power of attorney is, what's your name? Rick. Rick, you're the power of attorney. And you go, huh? What? Not a good position for Rick to be in. Okay? So communication is so vital. Once you have that done, all you need to do is have it witnessed, and then make sure you give a copy to Rick. Not this Rick, but your Rick, that might be, okay? Unless Rick, everybody's power. Have one in your house. Where are EMTs trained to look for healthcare directives in a house? On the fridge or in the freezer. So make sure you have one. Make sure it gets into your medical records. If anybody's been to a clinic or hospital lately, what's the first thing they ask you? Do you have a healthcare directive on file? Have it on file. Okay? Yeah.
So if you don't trust people to make the right Catholic decision, can you specify like the pastor of a church? Because if the pastor gets moved, can you just have a general pastor of a certain church?
That's a great question. I would say for sure if the pastor said, yes, I will do that for you.
But if that pastor gets moved.
Right. I don't know. I don't think you can do that because you have to have someone legally named.
Well, you'd have, who else would you want to trust?
Yeah,
hopefully.
Good point. Good point.
Because kids aren't going to follow your thing if they don't go to church.
Well, they kind of have to, though.
But they may not if they can do what they want.
Well, the healthcare directive does put some teeth behind that to say, this is what mom or I wanted, kids, even though you may not believe that. Here's what we really wanted to have happen. So it really helps with that as well. Okay. The other incapacity document is a what we call a durable power of attorney or a financial power of attorney. This is again a document that says, I'm unable to make financial decisions on my own due to disability, mental, whatever it is. Who do I name that can pay my bills, deal with the insurance company, deal with the nursing home, sell real estate, make charitable gifts, all the things that I might do financially? Who's going to make those decisions for me if I can? Right? Another very important document to have, because if you don't have somebody named, okay, the state will then determine, or the kids or the spouse has to go to court to get named as that person to take care of your affairs. All right? Very important. That does take a notary, so it's a little bit legally stronger document because it's got a lot of state statutes and stuff in there. But again, it directs that person to be able to manage your checkbook and all of those types of things. Always have a primary and always have a backup as well. And let that person know because they may need to deal with your financial affairs someday. I ask this question, there's always usually 3 or 4. Has anybody been a financial power of attorney for somebody before? Yeah, quite a few. So it is a real thing, okay? Now, one thing I want to call out is these are incapacity documents, meaning that if I ain't incapacitated anymore, meaning I'm dead, these powers end. So if I name my son Rick as my financial power of attorney, and he helps me out, and I die, Rick is done. He has no more power over my estate. Therefore, I need a document that names somebody to take care of my affairs when I'm gone. Okay, what's that document most people use to do that? Anybody? A will. Okay, because a will specifically says, when I die, Rick, well, I'm going to name my wife first, but Rick, you're my personal representative upon my death. Your job is to distribute assets that only the will can distribute. So again, if Rick is my personal representative, does he have any power over my life insurance policy and the beneficiaries? No, he does not. How about my IRA? How about my annuities? How about my retirement and 401k? Rick has no control over that. It's strictly based on the beneficiary designation. So again, it's very important to distinguish those. Okay? If I put in my will, hey, I want to leave some money to charity, Rick is responsible to do that. And then again, final expense planning. So what are the 4 ways that this can happen? Okay, so now let's think about our kids are sitting around the kitchen table, all our stuff's in the middle of that table. What tools do I need in place to make sure that happens? Or more importantly, how do each of my things that I have get to where they're supposed to go? Because they don't all get directed by the will, do they? So we got to account for those a little bit. So one way is the will. So I can use a will to direct certain assets, but if I have a will and the assets in that will are over $50,000, you will have a probate of your estate. So we'll talk about probate. Beneficiaries, we already talked a little bit about that one. Okay? Joint ownership. If you own an asset with somebody else, again, most common if you're married, you and your spouse probably own your home together. Okay? If one of the spouses dies, it doesn't go through that spouse's will. Why? Because there's another owner living. So if I die, my wife can take my death certificate down to the courthouse and say, hey, my husband passed away. I need to assign his share of the property to me. I'm the other owner. I can sign a form and do that. I'm done. I don't need my will to do that. Okay? But where do we need it then? When it's just me. So now I own my real estate or things in my name alone. I die. There's no one else there to sign that ownership, is there? There's no other owner. So now my will is probably going to take care of it at that point in time. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about what's called a revocable living trust. And a trust is like a bucket that holds assets for us to be managed for someone when you're gone. And I'll give you some examples of where a trust really makes some sense. All right, and I'm ripping through this pretty quick because I don't want to keep you here till 5 o'clock. Is that okay? All right, so let's talk about the will. Again, a legal document initiated at death. Does a will do you anything while you're living? Nope. It's a weird document, right? It only kicks in when you die. Now you can change it, you can do what you want with it, but it only comes into play when you pass away. Meaning I'm gone. I can't speak for myself. I name an executor, that's going to be Rick. His job is to pay expenses of the estate. I specify in my will who I want to get certain assets that are directed by the will. Test your knowledge. What assets aren't directed by the will? Anything that has a beneficiary. Oh, you got a smart group today. Okay? And then who will inherit, and then Rick's job is to distribute. So do you think an executor's job in a will is a pretty big deal? It can be, right? A little bit of work there, potentially. All right, so let's talk about what probate is. So if I have a will and I have more than $50,000 of assets passing through that will, most likely it's real estate, maybe a checking or savings account, that type of thing, maybe a mutual fund, okay, because everything else probably has a beneficiary, all right? So Rick takes the death certificate and the will down to the courthouse. The judge has to appoint Rick, and he says, Rick, you're a good guy, looks like everything's in order, you're the executor of John's estate. First thing you got to do, Rick, is tell me what all Dad had. So Rick has to file a summary of my assets with the court. Okay? Not a big deal, but we all know courts are public records. So therefore, probate, you lose privacy of your estate. Because any one of you, when I die, could go to the courthouse or the county courthouse of where I live and file my probate and find out exactly what I had in my estate. You think people do that?
Yeah, probably.
Who normally would do it? Creditors? Okay? I've even heard of real estate agents looking at probate because what's probably going to be for sale pretty soon? A house. Okay? So again, not a bad thing, but that's one of the disadvantages of probate is that you lose privacy. Rick also has to tell the world I died. And there's a 4 to 6 month waiting period before Rick can give any of my assets to his brothers and sisters. Remember, those are the 4 of them that are looking at Rick right now. Going, Rick, where's our stuff? Okay, they wouldn't do that. They're pretty nice people, but okay. Rick has to hold that estate open for 6 months. Why is that, do you think? Creditors. Because the expenses and creditors of the estate get paid before any of the kids. So probate takes between 4 to 6 months at minimum before things can be distributed. Now Rick can pay expenses, estate taxes, if there are any medical bills, all of that type of stuff. And whatever's left over in that will then goes to the siblings, if that's how I directed it. Okay? That's how a will works. Probate isn't a bad thing. It's not terrible. But there are ways that we can avoid having to go through that process. So let's look at what those are. What avoids probate? Well, I already told you, and you guys already answered me in strength. Anything that has a beneficiary is not a part of probate. Because of what? The beneficiary. So now if I have a life insurance policy and I die, Rick can get the policy, he gets my death certificate, all 5 of you kids sign the beneficiary form, they send it up to the insurance company. A week or 2 later, you all got a check for $100,000 if that's what it is, done. Rick didn't have to go to court, it doesn't count in my estate, it's private, pretty quick, immediate, and I'm done. Okay, pretty cool. So beneficiaries are ways that we avoid probate just naturally. Okay? Now, other assets you have that may not avoid probate unless you add beneficiaries to them. So bank products, so CDs, money market, checking, savings, all of those types of accounts usually go through probate because they're either as an owner or they have to go through the will. But the bank allows you to add a beneficiary to those accounts. Does anybody know what that's called? POD, payable on death. So again, if I said, boy, I got a pretty good sized CD and stuff, and I just want it to go to my 5 kids equally when I'm gone, I'm going to go to the bank and say, hey, Mr. Banker, I want to add a POD to that account. They'll ask for your kids' names and probably social securities and numbers and stuff, and now you're done. Because when you die, what does Rick have to do? Go to the bank with your death certificate, sign a form, they release the funds to the 5 kids, done. Okay? One other thing you can do, if you have an investment account, so the mutual funds, stocks, portfolio, a brokerage account, anything that's not like in an IRA or an annuity, because that has a beneficiary already. But if I have those types of investment accounts, I can go to my Ed Jones guy or whoever manages them and add what's called a TOD to those. Anybody know what that means? Transfer on death. So now I can have all my mutual funds, my stocks, my bonds, whatever I have, passed directly to my 5 kids just through that transfer on death. I've avoided probate. Rick again takes my death certificate to meet with the Ed Jones guy. They cut the shares to the 5 kids. They can decide how each one of them wants to reinvest or do whatever they want with it. But Rick didn't have to go through probate to do that.
Why don't banks just do that automatically for you?
You would kind of think they would, and maybe some do and ask you that. But I'm finding more and more when I work with individuals and we ask about their assets and, oh, I got CDs. And have you added a beneficiary? Yeah, we have. That's getting to be more common. But yeah, you're kind of right. okay? I know a lot of investment guys and gals make sure that's part of their investments with people is that TOD, okay? Unless someone for some reason wants to go through a probate, which there are reasons to do that, but it's more trust planning, it's more planning for maybe young kids inheriting assets. I'll talk briefly, there's what's called a special needs trust, that if someone has a disabled child or a child who maybe is on medical assistance, we don't want to have them inherit assets, right? So if I have a special needs child who maybe is on Social Security or Medicaid, and all of a sudden they inherit that $100,000 that I have for my 5 kids, what happens to their assistance? It goes away. So that's a reason to maybe have a probate, is to get assets into a trust like that. Okay? And I run across a lot of folks that do special needs trust. One of the best planning tools ever for someone who has that situation. And if you got questions about it later, we can certainly talk about it. But jointly held assets, again, like I said, that doesn't go through probate if you own an asset with somebody else. But now what if I'm in the situation where I have real estate, let's talk specifically real estate, that now I own alone. Okay, remember, there's no other owner. So the only way I can get that to my kids is through the will or probate. Well, not so fast. The state of Wisconsin, the state of Minnesota have a document now that you can add to your title of your real estate called a transfer on death deed. So you can now transfer real estate directly to your heirs through a beneficiary arrangement through the courthouse. I had my folks do this, it's just my brother and I. I said, Mom and Dad, I don't want to sit in probate. If you're going to leave the house to us anyway, let's go down to the courthouse for $50. They added a transfer on death deed to their title that says, when we're both gone, transfer the title of this real estate to John and Jim. It's my brother's name. We're done. Now my folks pass away, if they still own the house, because it doesn't preclude you from selling your house or whatever you want to do with it while you're living. But we take my mom or my dad's death certificate down to the courthouse, $50, they transfer the title of real estate to my brother and I, we're done. So that's a pretty cool tool as well, all right? And then lastly, trust, and I'll talk a little bit about trust as we go, because I want to bring up one other thing that kind of leads to a trust discussion, and then we'll wrap up for today. Let's talk specifically real estate. Again, I mentioned this concept earlier, that if I have a $500,000 account at the bank or whatever, and I leave that $500,000 to my 5 children, they just get $100,000 each, cash, pretty easy. How do you fight about that? Okay? I might give Rick $10 more for taking care of my estate, but, okay? Don't be mad now, guys. Okay? Rick's worth more than $10, I think, too. But now let's talk, if I have an asset that isn't easily divided, which is real estate. So I have a house, I have a cabin, I have a home down in Arizona, I have some hunting ground, I have some farmland, I have a piece of real estate that I would like to get to my heirs. And maybe I want it to get to my grandkids at some point in time, okay? So let's talk about that. You guys today, you come out of this meeting today and you go, God, we should really use that TOD for the real estate we have. John did such a great job of explaining what that is, and we can void probate, but that land's going to go to my 5 kids and they'll deal with it. Okay? Well, here's what that looks like. This is an example of 6 kids, so I should have picked a table with 6, but I didn't. So again, cabin, house, farm, whatever it is, if I have a simple estate plan that says I'm just going to leave that asset directly to my 6 kids, after I die, they now all own what? An undivided 1/6 of that piece of property. Okay? Now, Rick, I can't say, Rick, you get this half of the house. Okay, what's your name, young man?
Ken.
Ken? Ken, you get the outbuilding because you like to work on wood. Okay? You can't do that. It's an undivided 1/6 of the total. And now I have 6 people owning an undivided 1/6. Who else really owns that property too? The in-laws. Because in the state of Wisconsin and Minnesota, if this daughter wants to sell her sixth, he has to sign off on that. So now I have 11 people owning a piece of property together. Okay? What if? What if they just can't agree? So let's say it's a cabin up in northern Wisconsin and Ken's moved, he's down in Arizona now. And Ken goes, you know, I'm never gonna go to that cabin, okay? I love it, but I'm done with that, I don't need to go there anymore. What's Ken's responsibility yet? 1/6 of the taxes, 1/6 of the upkeep. And Ken's like, I don't like that. I want to sell my sixth. Now what? And everybody knows that when I died, that cabin was worth $500,000. Okay? Does Ken want $100,000, and does Rick want to pay him $100,000? Maybe not. Now they probably would get along, and I'm thinking you're probably all thinking my kids would probably get along. They'd be okay with that. But what if they aren't? Okay? What if they can't agree on who uses it? What if, again, I'm in this situation and my goal is to keep that asset in the family, okay? And one of my daughters gets a divorce from her spouse. Where is that 1/6 going to go? To my son-in-law, okay? What if my daughter goes bankrupt, has creditor problems? What if my daughter goes and has a beer one day at the local pub and on her way home gets in a car accident, kills somebody, and gets sued for everything she has? Can they come after her sixth? Yep, it's hers. Okay? Everybody accuses me of always thinking the worst of people, but okay, we've got to think about that, right? What we do is we help eliminate or lessen risk. And that's really what this is. Lastly, you know, I'd kind of like to have my grandkids be part of this maybe. Okay? So again, if I have a simple plan, and I'll pick on this guy, okay, he dies now. Where is his sixth going to go? To my daughter-in-law. Okay? Which may flow to my grandchildren, but what if my daughter-in-law does this? You know, my husband died a couple years ago. I'm pretty lonely. I met a guy. I'm going to go get married again. And that guy has 3 kids of his own. Now what?
Confusion.
Great word, confusion. Potentially, right? But these are things that when we're planning, we've got to look at and make sure that maybe my plan is, you know what? My kids are great kids. I ain't going to deal with all of this. I'm just going to leave it to them equally and they'll deal with it. That's a plan. Okay? That's a plan. And maybe I take John's advice and take it out of probate so my kids are good. That's a plan. But what if I'm afraid of that? What if I want to make sure that I, as a parent, can put a little bit of control is a bad word, but I like to use it anyway. A little bit of control on what happens to that farm or land. Now we talked about a trust. Okay? A revocable living trust is a way to hold on to an asset after you're gone and distribute it or not according to your wishes. So what I would do in this particular case is I would work with an attorney and I would say, you know what? I want to make sure that that land stays in the family, but more importantly, I want to set some of the parameters around if Ken wants to sell his share, I want to control that, not having 5 kids have to control that, and the other 5 in-laws. So a trust allows you, and I use this word rule book, it allows you to create a rule book on what happens with that asset. But how I do it is I transfer the title of that asset into the bucket while I'm living. Okay? So you kind of gift an asset to yourself. Who controls this bucket until the day you die? Gave that away. You do. Okay? If you want to sell the cabin, you can do whatever you want with it. But it just sits in that. The only thing that changes is when you get your tax statement, the title will say, the trust of John Tetzlaff. That's it. Okay? But you still control it. You say, okay, here's my rule book. The day I die, it's already in the trust. which means I avoid what? Probate, because it's already there. And as long as it's in this bucket, do the 5 kids, 6 kids have any access to, rights to, or make decisions on that asset in the trust?
No.
No, they do not. Because who owns it? The trust owns it, not my 6 kids, 5 kids. Okay? So I can then say, okay, kids, wait, Rick, I'm still going to name you as trustee because I need someone to read my rule book when I'm gone. Rick, you're going to be doing a lot of work. Okay? But I can put in there then, you know what, guys? I want to keep this cabin in the family. And I want it to go to my grandchildren and only my grandchildren, and I don't want it to ever go to my in-laws. Sound like a crabby old man, don't I? Okay? But you can say that. So it stays in your family. And then I can say, okay, we're going to keep it in there. If one of you wants to sell, here's what that looks like. And I can set prices, I can set terms, whatever, as far as I want to take this. Okay? So again, trusts aren't for everybody, but for the right situation and what you want to see happen, it is a wonderful tool. Okay? It also, again, manages assets for somebody. Let's say, again, I have a son or daughter who's in a really bad marriage. Or I have a son or daughter who maybe has a gambling or drug addiction. I mean, all these things. Do I want that son or daughter to just inherit a bunch of assets when I'm gone? Maybe not. Okay? Therefore, I can put in here cash accounts, money market accounts, my investment accounts. I can have the beneficiary of my life insurance be what? My trust. So now everything flows through this bucket and says, here's where I want that to go. It also can say, hey, you know what? If one of my kids dies, I want their share to go to who? My grandkids. And they can be managed in there for my grandkids. So I always recommend if you have grandkids who are young and potentially can inherit, a grandchildren's trust is a really nice piece to eliminate that risk. So if one of your kids dies and that shares to go to a 10-year-old, well, 10-year-olds can't inherit assets, so where's it go? I want it to sit in here to create a trust or create a place to hold that. Okay? One thing that these do not do, though, and I want to always make sure people understand that, is that a trust does not protect assets from nursing home. Okay? Because you still control them. It's revocable. Okay? Any questions on that? Yeah?
Is there an amount limit?
Nope.
What can go in here?
Nope. That's a great question. A lot of people think that all this planning, I got to have a $5 million estate. No, you don't. It's what you want to see happen and how you want to direct those assets when you're gone. Some are very simple. I've had people say, all my mom had was a checking account and maybe a house. It just went to the kids, we took care of it, and away we went. Okay? So planning is very individual. These are just the tools that we use to help make it happen. Okay? There's a testamentary trust. I say this because if you have children who have young children, talk to them and say, do you have a trust in your will that if you and your husband or you and your wife die and you have young children, there's a trust to hold assets for your kids till they get to be a certain age. Have that discussion with your children who may have children. Okay? Big deal. It's an easy peasy thing to put in place. Okay? And then there's that special needs trust. I wanted to just show that as well. It's again the same bucket, but if you transfer assets while you're living or at death to be for the benefit of that disabled child. And again, it doesn't hurt their ability to get medical assistance and stuff. Now I'm running across this a lot more. I had a grandma in, where was it, South Dakota. She has 2 special needs daughters, and she's creating a special needs trust because she wants equal assets to go to her grandchildren, but she doesn't want those 2 daughters to inherit those assets outright because now their medical assistance is gone. Okay, and they have to report that because if they don't report that, that's Medicaid fraud. That can be a nasty deal, okay? All right, so recap, we can use a will or probate to direct and communicate certain assets and how they're distributed. The will, I think though, the biggest thing that a will does is it names Rick to take care of my affairs. Now I've got somebody talking for me when I'm gone, okay? Whoops. Beneficiaries, pretty easy. Just make sure they're who you want them to be. So dig out your old policies, call your insurance guy, have Vicki do a complete review for you, and we'll call the insurance companies to find out who your beneficiaries actually are and make sure they match your plan. Joint ownership, again, pretty easy. Where joint ownership gets a little sticky is if it's owned not by spouses. So Vicki and I are meeting with somebody today, two brothers and a sister own a business together. You think that takes a little more planning? But think of like a brother and a brother owning a farm, or brothers and sisters owning a cabin at some point, okay? That can get a little sticky. And then we talked about the living trust. So those are, again, the 4 different ways that stuff can move. Any questions so far? I'm going to end with one other quick topic. All right. Bonus. It's a charitable giving idea, okay? I'm sure a lot of you are already doing this, but there's a special tax rule that's called the qualified charitable distribution. And this applies to a kind of a limited amount of people. You have to be 70 and a half or older, and you have to have an IRA. Can't be a 401k or anything else, it has to be an IRA. The federal government allows you each and every year after age 70 and a half to distribute from your IRA directly to your charity, your church, wherever it is, completely tax-free. What is your most highly taxable asset in retirement? Your IRAs, your 401ks, because you're paying all the tax you never paid tax on in the past. Okay? This allows a person who's charitable to be able to pull money from their IRA and use that for charity on a tax-free basis. You can do up to $108 grand a year. All right? And the other thing it does anybody or everybody know what a required minimum distribution is? Used to be at age 70 and a half, if you had IRAs or 401s, you had to take money out, right? The government calculates that for you, and you have to take a percentage of your IRA out every year, pay taxes on it, okay? This QCD can satisfy that RMD. A lot of acronyms, right? Okay? Use my mom again. Use my mom for a lot of examples. Her RMD every year from the Catholic United Financial IRA was about $2,200. That's what she had to take out every year. And I said, Mom, how much do you give to the church every week or throughout the year in your normal tithing? She said about $2,000. And I said, why are you taking $2,200 out of your IRA, paying taxes on it, putting it in your checkbook, and then writing the church a check every week for no tax break at all? Plus that $2,000 she wants to give to the church every year, she's got to take how much out of her IRA to make that $2,000? About $2,200, because she's got to pay taxes on that. I said, Mom, why don't we call up Catholic United in January, tell them to take the RMD, that $2,200, send it directly to St. John the Baptist Catholic Church in Mankato, Minnesota. Now the church has a $2,200 gift. She paid 0 tax on it, and she satisfied the required minimum distribution. You've got to do that if you're over 70 and you have an IRA. Okay? You know what her biggest concern was? And I'm picking on my mom a little bit. What are people going to say if I don't put an envelope in the envelope tray every month or week? I said, Mom, no one's watching you do that. She said, oh, I think they are. So, okay, no big deal. All right? This is also a great tool to use if you want to leave a legacy. Okay? If you say in your will or your plan, hey, I'd like the church to get X when I pass away. Don't wait and plan it and do it when you die. Okay? Create that gift now using what? Your IRA. So you can say, I want to leave the church 20 grand when I pass away. Okay? Take the 20 grand out of your IRA today, pay 0 tax on it, put it in a foundation. Catholic United has a foundation that will grow that money for you, and you tell them, hey, when I die, take that money plus the growth and make a gift to my church. Done. And who didn't have to go and do that? Rick. Okay? And I took 20 grand out of my IRA tax-free. I'm just throwing numbers, so, okay? Who also didn't have to pay tax on that 20 grand when I died? My kids. Okay? You're right, the church doesn't, but if I leave my IRA money to my kids and make a gift of my cash to the church when I die, that don't make sense. Because now my kids got to pay 25, 30% of my IRA money, and the church doesn't pay taxes. Okay? Questions on that? Yes?
Does an annuity work that way?
If it is an IRA annuity, yes. It has to be an IRA.
It's called the tax treatment.
Yep. Now, I have had people who have a bunch of money in 401 and they're like, 401k, and they're like, I want to kind of do this. Well, you can do a rollover of a 401 into what? An IRA. And now you're set. Okay? So it's a pretty cool concept. Again, if you want more information on it, let me know. But anybody over 70, at least when you're doing your normal tithing, you should be using your IRA money. It's money anyway. It's part of your account. Okay? All right, now what? We got a lot of information today, and we're done. So you guys can relax. We're not going any farther. Well, good long meeting, but I think a lot of great information. In terms of funeral planning, in terms of estate planning, and understanding the gifts that God has blessed us and how we want to make that move when we pass, you got to know what you got. Every asset you have, whether it's a lot or a little, plays by a little bit different rule. Okay? This is something that Catholic United Financial, we are a not-for-profit financial services company for Catholics that help people gather that information and put it into a asset summary. We have a little fun with this. So we show where all your stuff is, what company it's with, who the beneficiaries are. Because remember, this isn't part of your will. Okay? This is a great tool. It's a one-page that I would suggest if you do this, you tell your kids or you tell Rick, because he's your executor, hey Rick, when I die, go grab my estate planning book. On the front cover is where everything's at. Now Rick, he knows where all my stuff is. He doesn't have to go digging through statements to find things. So it's a great tool. But it also talks about, is it probate or not? How's it taxed? All of those things. If you're going to do a trust or a will or gets updated things from attorneys, this planning helps you get ready to do that. Because what's the first thing the attorney's going to ask you? What do you got? Here's what I got. You're done. So it really helps. And then we talk trusts. We talk protection of assets, potential tax issues, all of that kind of thing along the way. So it's a really cool planning service that we can provide in conjunction with what Anna does and then what Father does as well for the spiritual side. All right. Thank you for spending a couple hours today with us. Anna, thank you for your information. I can tell you're pretty well known. A lot of people know you when you walked in, or when they walked in, so you must be doing a good job. So rely on Anna for those funeral needs and stuff, and really, again, look at pre-funding those. Any questions anybody might have? Okay, we'll be around a little bit after if you got more of a specific question. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Vicki real quick, and then you guys can hang out or go home or whatever you want to do.
Thank you, Don,
Yep, thank
for
you.
sharing your knowledge. Also, a huge thank you to Judy and Dorothy, who had to leave for the service at the nursing home, for their support and helping me get this organized. Thank you, Anna. In your folders, or handed out to you, you would have had a drawing slip. If you haven't filled it out, please do so. The red box on the table there, just go ahead and drop it in and we'll do a drawing for the gift. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to put their slip in. If you are interested in having personalized discussions, I mean, we gave a lot of information today, and there may be situations within your own personal situation that you would want to discuss privately. I'm happy to come. My business card is in the folder. Feel free to give me a call. It's at the bottom of the flyer for our next session, which is November 4th. So hopefully we'll see every one of you. The topic is different on the 4th of November. So please come back and for lunch we'll do. It's here right after Mass, just like we did today, but on the 4th of November.
What's the topic?
The topic is long-term care planning. So how do we plan for the cost of long-term care? Nursing home cost is a big deal. It's a big deal, and much like funeral costs, they are definitely going up. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you for hosting this.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.